morning is from Colossians chapter 3, verses 5 through 14. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. But now you yourselves are to put off these things: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge, according to the image of him who created him. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is in all and in all. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another. Even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection.
Today, as we begin in Colossians 3, verse 5, and what Mark just read for us, I think the temptation is going to be that we're going to see a list of things that we don't need to do, and we're going to see a list of things we should do. And our walk away from that is that we're going to think that, man, really I just need to make sure that I'm not doing these things, I'm following these rules, and I'm just trying to be a better person. And I don't want us to be tempted to boil down what Paul is saying and what Jesus is calling you to just to a list of rules. There's something much deeper going on. And I want to read Psalm 115, verses 4 to 8, to kind of help set the scene for what Paul's really getting at. In Psalm 115, it says, "But their idols are silver and gold, made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. They have ears but they cannot hear, noses but they cannot smell, and they have hands but they cannot feel, feet but they cannot walk, nor can they utter a sound with their throats. Those who make them," and this is what I want you to see, "will be like them. And so will all who trust in the Lord." Trust in them. What I want you to see is, as Israel is going through and they're doing their thing, they're trying to follow God, but what you'll see as you go through their history is that more times than not is that they will follow other gods, and even if they're coming to worship Yahweh on the Sabbath day, Israel is being slowly transformed, and they're starting to look more and more like the gods that they're worshiping in the land of Canaan. So much so that when the psalmist writes this, they said that you will become like the things that you worship. And so what Paul is getting at is that when we give our lives over to anger, into lust, into slander, what we will begin to do is that we will begin to slowly become like those things. And the question that we have to ask ourselves constantly is, what are you being renewed into? And so every word you speak, every action that you do is slowly forming you into the image of something. And the question that Paul is asking is, what is the image that you are being made into? Is the things that you're saying, are they bearing the image of Jesus, or Or are they bearing the image of something else? And over time, as I give my heart more and more into anger and more into slander, what happens is that I will become a person that bears the image of anger, that bears the image of slander. And so your words and your actions don't exist just within a vacuum or in a bubble, but they very much begin to shape who you are. And for Paul, he is asking you, as he's for 2 chapters now just talked about how great Jesus is, he's elevated Jesus, and he's saying, are you being renewed in the image of Christ, or are you being renewed into the image of something else? With every little word and every little thing that you give your heart to, eventually you will be formed into an image of something. And so for Paul, as he's going into all of this, he's got the Old Testament in the back of his mind, and what he knows is that Jesus and God made you to worship something. The core part of who you are and all that you say and all that you do, you are reflecting what you are worshiping. Your heart has been given to something. And so when I act, I am showing you what is truly deep within my heart. And as I act, I begin to shape my heart more and more, and I bear an image of something more and more. And for Paul, he's going to call you back and saying, make sure that you're being renewed into the image of Jesus. But really what he's saying is that what has your heart has you. So let's go into Colossians 3. Let me read it again. I'm going to read verses 5 to 10 this time. It says, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life that you once lived, but now you must rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have been taken off the old self with its practice, and you have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge and the image of its creator. A lot of times as we go through life, what we believe is that if I have the right motivations, that it's going to lead to action. My motivation is always going to decide how I'm acting. Psychology, as recently as they've been researching, is starting to see more and more that that's not true. Your actions actually decide your motivations. And that if you want to develop a new habit or if you want to develop a new motivation, they say the best way is not trying to do a bunch of research to change the motivation. What they're saying is that you need to make sure you're starting to act in the way that you want to be motivated. And so your actions will determine your motivation and begin to look at your heart. And so what happens is that your actions are going to say more about you than anything else. That's why Jesus comes back and he tells us to evaluate the fruit of the people that we know, and how they live and what they say and how they act. All of that is constantly showing you who you are and where you're going. So for Paul, it's not a simple list of rules that he's wanting you to follow. He's really saying, make sure that your heart is pursuing Jesus and being constantly renewed into the image of Christ. Because no matter what, you are bearing an image into everything you do. And so my question for you is, as you're sitting there and thinking about it, man, we have opinions on everybody around us. We have opinions on our parents, our siblings, our children. We have opinions on our friends, our coworkers, those that we rub shoulders with. They have bared their image to us long enough that we typically form a pretty accurate opinion on them. Let me turn the cards back on you, or the tables back on you. And when people see you walk through their door, what are their first thoughts of you? Are they excited that you are here? Are they excited to see you? Or are they a little bit scared and hesitant? Because as you walk through the door, they know that slander is coming along with you, that gossip is going to be right behind you. Are they excited to see you because, man, you speak life into everybody that you know and you're so filled with grace and goodness and kindness? Or when you walk through that door, they know that you're going to be filled with anger, and that they've got to brace themselves for what's getting ready to happen. Let me look at Colossians 3:5, and I really want you to look at the very last part of that verse. It says, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to you, your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed." And here's what I want you to highlight, to circle, to just emphasize. He says, which is idolatry. All right, and so as Paul is getting here, and he's starting to talk about all of these actions that you're doing and that you're bearing an image, what you're really starting to do is that you've given your heart to something. And so if I'm sitting there and I'm acting in greed, it's not just a sin. What Paul's going to say is that you're committing idolatry. Because you've given your heart over to something, you're looking for purpose and fulfillment, you're looking for safety and security, and so what you're turning to is greed in that moment, of jealousy. And so instead of seeing Jesus as your life, which has been the 2 chapters of Colossians where Paul has talked about that Jesus is your life, He is your all, He is everything to you. That if He is not everything to you, you will begin to turn to impurities, you will turn to sexual immorality, you will turn to greed, to anger, to putting other people down, into jealousy. Because you are constantly trying to find something that you can't find anywhere else. And so for Paul, he's not coming in and he's not trying to say, just don't do these things. For Paul and for what God's calling you to, it's really just showing where your heart is at all times. We have to be careful with how we live. Because my actions will decide who I am. It will decide my motivation, and it will decide my heart. And over time, I will become the person that my actions say that I am. Not my intentions, not what I wish would happen, but who I am and how I act and what I say and how I treat the people around me is forming me into an image. And it's because whatever you are acting and whatever you're doing has your heart. Let's keep going. Colossians 3, verse 10. It says, "And have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge of the image of its creator." So what Paul's going to tell you is that you are casting off certain things and you're putting on something. But what I love is that if you know your Old Testament pretty well, is that you're being renewed in the image of the creator. The last time we see image of creator, the first time we see it, is in the book of Genesis. In Genesis 1, God's created in the image of His creator, God. And so for you to truly step into being human and to step into who God created you to be means that you are walking in Christ and that Jesus is your life. And so I'm going to walk in kindness and compassion and love and understanding because that's who God made me to be. So to be human means then I am representing Jesus in all that I do. To bear His image into all of creation, to every person around me, into every circumstance and every situation, I am bearing the image of Jesus. And so, Molly stole my idea. She brought a dirty clothes. But I love it. As she was talking, I was like, man, I don't even need to do all this. But let me give you what he's telling you to do. The image that he's saying is quite literally that you're casting off clothes. These are clean clothes. I didn't go stomp on these in the mud. But what he is saying is that you are called to cast off anger. And so you will take your coat off that is soiled and disgusting and breathes death and destruction into all that you do. And so you're going to take that off. And then instead of being anger, you're going to put on compassion. You're going to put on a new, nice image of who Jesus calls you to be. And instead of being filled with sexual immorality and lust, we're going to be filled with compassion. Our problem comes is that a lot of times we can deal with some of the big stuff, the stuff that we don't necessarily struggle with. Right? I can deal with certain sins that is not a big deal. So I can quite easily take off my jacket of one sin and put on the new image that Jesus has. But we have pet sins that we like to keep in our life and are hidden to a lot of people. And so we'll keep the socks of lust. We'll keep the socks of greed. And what Paul is telling you is that if you keep, these are my socks by the way, If you keep these socks of greed and lust or whatever it is, that eventually what will happen to you is you will be formed into the image of lust, of the pet sin that you like to keep, of anger, of greed, that eventually these socks will become much bigger than a pair of socks. They will become your pants, they will become your shirt, and you will bear the image of that pet sin that you like to keep around time and time again. And so my question to you is, as you go through these lists in verses 5 and verse 7, is what is your pet sin? What is the thing that you can take off and everybody doesn't see a big deal? I can easily take off greed because I don't struggle with greed, and I can put on the shirt of compassion. I can put on the shirt of kindness and treat others well. But what's that one sin that just, man, you just don't want other people to find out? What's that one sin that you're okay with? What's the one sin that gives excitement, that gets you out of bed sometimes, that motivates you? And we think too many times that it's just small and insignificant. But what Paul is telling you is that, man, you are slowly being crafted into the image of something. And the longer you keep that one sin in your life, which is idolatry, it's not just sin, it's idolatry, because you're not turning to Jesus. What he promises you is that you will be renewed into that image. You will be renewed into the image of whatever has your heart. And Jesus reminds us that we cannot serve two masters. One will win. And more times than not, as I have walked with people, it is the pet sin that wins time and time again. Because we don't think it's a big deal. We don't keep our guards up. And we will slowly start to transform into the image of whatever we're keeping with us. Let's keep going. Colossians 3:12-14. It says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved," here you go, "clothe yourself with compassion, with kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if you have a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all of these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity." So here's another point that I want you to remember, is that when you see these lists of don't do this, there's never a call just to stop an action. What Jesus is saying is that you are taking off, and he doesn't want you to remain naked. He wants you to put on the clothes of goodness and kindness, of virtue, of love. But too many times we get into these lists and we're like, man, okay, God just doesn't want me to do these things. And we miss verse 12 where it says, "Therefore, once you take off these clothes of sin and idolatry, of greed, of lust, of all of these things, make sure that you're putting on in its place compassion, kindness, humility, and gentleness." The New Testament is not filled with just a call to stop a certain sin, a certain action. It is always, always, always followed up for you to do the opposite of it. And so instead of being filled with greed, I remove greed from my life. I turn to Jesus, and Jesus is my peace. He is the one that gives me security. He's the one that gives me strength. He's the one that really provides all that my heart is longing for. And now, instead of being greedy, I show compassion to people. Instead of seeing people as objects for me to make more money and to serve me, I turn to Jesus, and now I am serving them. What you will notice in those two lists between verses 5 and verse 7, and then when you go down to verse 12, is that verses 5 and 7 are all self-focused. They're focused on you. Let's look through it, just to prove my point. "Put to death, therefore, whatever brings to earthly nature sexual immorality, that's focused on you, impurity, which is focused on you, lust, it is focused on you, evil desires is focused on you, greed is focused on you." Go to verse 8. "But you also rid yourselves of such things as anger," that's you, "rage, you, malice, slander, filthy language." All of that is you-focused. It is selfish, it is self-centered. But then when we get into verse 12, "Clothe yourselves with compassion, That's someone else. Kindness is how we treat people. Humility is putting others before yourself. Gentleness is how we treat the people. Patience is how we interact with them and endure with people. Do you see the list is completely opposite of one another? And so I'm casting off selfishness and self-centeredness, and I am clothing myself in selflessness. That's why the end in verse 14, the zip up, as Molly gives, is love. It is inherently focused on the people around me. Now there's one verse that I have not read. It's verses 10 and 11. It says, "And put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free." But here we go. "But Christ is all and is in all." And so if I am got a right view of Jesus, if he is my all, man, then greed, lust, sexual immorality, if I go into malice, if I go into anger, if I go into tearing other people down and gossip and jealousy, man, I'm turning to something else. Jesus is not my all. But if Jesus is my all, then I will freely give compassion, kindness, goodness, and gentleness and patience with other people. That's why Colossians 1 and 2 have to come first, because if I've got a high view of Jesus and if he is my all, then man, it stops depending. I don't treat people the way they deserve. Your call is not to treat people the way they deserve. Because when we start to interact and we start to treat people the way they deserve, more times than not, we will sit there and we'll look at someone and we'll say, "Man, you remember that one time that they said something really mean? Or do you remember that one time they didn't say hey to me in the grocery store? Do you remember that one time they stabbed me in the back?" And so now I'm not treating them with compassion or kindness or gentleness. I'm not treating them with love. I will justify my selfishness and my greed in the way that I interact with them. What Jesus is calling you to in verse 11 is that if Christ is my all and he's in all, it is not dependent on how they act. It's dependent on how I view Jesus. And so if Jesus has forgiven me, if he has been kind to me, if he has been good to me, then how can I not show that to the people around me? It no longer depends on how they treat me, because my eyes are set on Jesus. And he is my all, not them. So the only way that we begin to cast off our clothing, to cast off the sins that we want to keep hidden, our socks that no one else can see, or we think that no one else can see, is that Jesus has to be your all. And the question you need to be asking yourself is, why are you turning to greed? Why are you turning to jealousy? Why are you turning to slander? What are you getting out of these things that you can't find in Jesus? And if we can take a moment to pause and reflect on our own heart, then man, we can say, "Jesus, I need to find my purpose, my security, my self-meaning, and my self-worth in you, and not by pushing other people down." So as we wrap up, the question that I want to leave you with is, what are you being renewed into? What image are you being renewed? Is it the image of your Creator, who is one that acts in love and kindness and goodness? Or is it the image of anger, lust, greed, malice, evil thoughts, evil desires? We need to look at our actions. And so again, following Jesus is not just about a list of rules. Following Jesus isn't thinking that if I go to church more, if I stop doing these things, then I'm doing good. Following Jesus is my all, and that's going to change how I interact with people around me. Let me pray. Father, in this moment we pause. And Lord, we confess that so many times it can be just so easy to find our purpose, our meaning, our drive in the things around us. It can be easy for us to become selfish, to become greedy, to use and abuse those that are closest to us. Jesus, we pray that you would forgive us of our own sin, of our own failure. And God, in that, help us to see your love and kindness. God, help us to see that you are our all, you are our life, you are everything. And what we're so desperately searching for in anything and everything else can only really be found in you. And with that, Jesus, help us to bear your image, to be renewed into your image. And I ask these things in your name. Amen.